Hello, hello. Welcome back to a special episode of Two Dumbbell Blondes. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Katie.
If you are watching us on YouTube, be sure to like and hit that subscribe button. And then if you're listening to us on any platform, be sure to rate us with those 5 stars and give us a follow. I'm going to kick it over to Katie, but as I mentioned, this is a special little episode, a little bonus to season 2 in between 2 and 3. And we're going to talk about a very popular topic around this December timeframe.
Yeah, so Lindsay and Brandon and I were sitting down and talking about season 3, and we realized that this time of year, people start talking about something that we are very passionate about, and that is New Year's resolutions. And while many people are excited about this time of year to create New Year's resolutions and to create that change, Lindsay and I both agree that New Year's resolutions are not our favorite thing. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, the whole new year, new you, let's get that out of here.
Yeah. I think our people listening are like, wait, what? I mean, isn't the new year a good time to just like refresh and just set new intentions? And I mean, the answer is yes. It doesn't have to be the new year. It can be really any time in your life. Lindsay and I, we were just chatting about like your birthday, or for me, my mom passed away in April. And so I always have a self-reflection time in April around maybe different things that I want to do, just because it's a very meaningful time. So setting intentions and creating goals for the future is not a bad thing, but having it be the new year timeframe is not the end all be all. And then where our passion comes in is, what do those goals look like? Why are you setting these goals for yourself? And do they truly have deep meaning to spur the change that you want? Or are they just arbitrary goals because you feel like, oh, it's the new year. And like Lindsay said, it's the new year, new you. So let's get into it, Lindsay.
Yeah, so I know coming into this, we like to do these episodes where we kind of surprise each other and we come with ideas and we just like hear them in the moment and we don't know ahead of time. So it's funny, you kind of teed up one of them for me, and it's this assigning a special date to January 1. And I am all for being mindful of when and how you want to go about change. And to your point, that could be any day. It could have significance, or it could just be like, you know what, I'm sick of feeling this, that, and the other, and I want to make change. So I think that when we put so much emphasis on this hard start date, we start to treat our goals and those actions we need to take as things that are on and off, right? And so if we're waiting to make change before January 1st, or we can't do it until January 1st, I would reevaluate what is your process and what is your plan, because you shouldn't feel like you're on and off. You shouldn't feel like December is the month where I'm quote unquote off and doing whatever the hell I want. And then come January 1, that's okay because I'm going to have to give up this, that, and the other and be super strict and rigid. And then I can achieve my goals. It's like, no, let's like take a bigger picture view here of your entire year. And like, what are you doing throughout the entirety of it, and not within, a certain month frame to go like hog wild and then come back around January 1.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that going like to the science of change, when we change, we have to be ready. We have to be prepared. There are things that are happening in our lives, whether it be job or family or opening new businesses. And I think that the January 1st timeframe, we think like, okay, it's January 1st. It's a new year. It actually doesn't matter what else is going on in my life. I just need to create this goal right now because it's a new year and this is what it is. Not realizing like, oh, I have all of these other things that are happening in my life at the same time. And I'm actually not prepared and ready for this change to happen. And that's okay. We are hard on ourselves. We rarely give ourselves grace, like we've talked about many, many times. And so that's potentially part of, I'm going to throw a little stat at you. 90% of people do not follow through with their New Year's resolutions for more than 2 or 3 months. Like only 10% make it past that. And so much of it has to do with the reality of, were we prepared for this change? Whatever, whether it be big, but whether it be small, whether it be fitness related or whether it be life related, right? Like we just have to, we set these goals and we're like, yes, it's the new year. We got to do this. And we forget about maybe the most important aspect of that change.
Yeah, the stat you threw out there, I believe there's an actual date that falls about 2 or 3 weeks out from January 1. That's an actual like Quitter's Day. Like it's the
I didn't
national
know
holiday.
that.
Yeah, yeah, where
Okay.
people quit
Wait,
their
hold on.
goals.
The National Quitters Holiday?
It's something like that.
I mean, I
Yes.
like that if we're like talking about smoking or
Yeah.
something, but
Like
not
didn't
going.
yeah, like didn't make my resolutions past 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And I
Well,
think that goes back to like a bigger idea of when you sign up for a challenge or when you sign up, we've talked about 75 hard or,
yeah.
whole 30 or whatever it is. I think that's something to ask yourself when you do think through these things you want to change is what's the plan after? Like there shouldn't necessarily be an after. There shouldn't be a finish line because there's not a finish line to your health until
Right.
you're no longer with us. But like you should start to think of, are these things that I'm doing sustainable? Are they realistic? Are they flexible and adaptable? Because like you said, our life, sometimes things do take the backseat, but that doesn't mean they stop. It just means that they need to be adjusted. So I think when we get like really hard start on things and like make these rules for ourselves, it's hard to stick to them because you're
Yeah.
so black and white with it instead of being more flexible and adaptable.
And we try to change too many things at once, which we know doesn't work. It's not, you will never be successful when you're trying to change a million things at once. Even 3 things at once. You got to start small. So you mentioned setting unrealistic goals and having goals that are too big, which is definitely something that we have all fallen victim to. And we set these big goals, but then we don't take the time or we don't know how to break those goals down into smaller chunks. Another thing that I see that you and I chatted about before we popped on was just understanding the true motivation and the why for that change. So in our jobs, in our past, we hear all the time, I want to lose X amount of weight. I want to lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds. And this year I'm going to get down to 150 pounds or whatever it may be. And I think you said it best. You say you always ask, what will that get you? What's that going to change in your life? Like, what does that arbitrary number, like what meaning does it have? And oftentimes people can't answer that. Am I right? Like they just think because of social media, because they're friends, because of whoever, they're like, well, I don't know. It just sounds like a good number. And I mean, we know that immediately that goal will probably not happen, will not be achieved because there's no meaning, there's nothing behind it. And so really if you're going to set a goal, if you're going to, whether it's the new year, whether it's your birthday, really understanding like how you want to feel and what the why behind those goals are. I want to feel healthier so that I can X is way more important and impactful to create change versus that arbitrary number.
Yeah, so that kind of hits on another one I had coming into today. And you said, instead of focusing on the what, focus on the why. I would go a step further and focus on the who. So coming into this, like we are taught to set SMART goals, right? So SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Somewhere in there might be a why, right? But there's not a who. There's not a who does this allow you to become, right? So I think
that statement right there is so powerful, Liz. Who does this allow you to become?
Yes. So when I work with clients on this, or even when I think about this for myself, it's your identity, right? And so I actually just got done with a nutrition course, a nutrition class, and it was really interesting because there's all these things, right, that they're supposed to go do. Like I'm going to prep some food, I'm going to track my food, all these tasks. And then there was a week where I noticed one of the people in class, she started sharing her meal prep on Instagram. And then I noticed she was doing it consistently. So I asked her about it and she said, yeah, I started doing it. And then people started asking me questions. So now I feel like I need to post about my meal prep. And it's that identity, right? Now she is known among her friends and her family as someone that meal preps. And so she's like, that feels good. And I want to keep delivering on that. So I think whenever you're going through your goals, right, you list, maybe you want to run a marathon or a half marathon or something like that. The goal isn't to run the race. The goal is to become a runner. And in order to become a runner, you have to do what? You have to run. And you don't have to do 10 miles. You don't have to do 20 miles. You just have to run.
Yeah. Yep. You just have to get out
Yeah.
there and move your body.
It's
Yep.
like, am I, and I know I've talked about this before, but the actions that you do or don't take cast votes for that person you want to become. So every day that I run, I am aligning with me being a runner. Every day that I don't run, am I a runner? I don't know. How many days in a row am I not running? Right. So it's like, how do you start to cast votes for that person that you want to be? And it also lets the pressure off of it, because all you have to do in that case is show up. You don't have to do so much of any one thing. It's not these hard and fast rules. It's, am I doing the thing? Am I just
Am I
simply
doing
showing
it?
up?
Yep. Yep. And you're right. We get too focused on, and I get it. It's easier to say I'm going to run a marathon, and it's much more accepted by our friends and family if we say I'm going to run a marathon versus like my goal is to become known and to have the identity of a runner, because that's like maybe weird.
Mhm.
It's actually not weird. It's really powerful. So we set these goals, and but once you start doing it, showing up consistently, it's showing up day in and day out, whether you're running 10 miles or whether you're running around the block, because maybe that's all you can fit in for that day. It's that consistency that changes the identity for the external world, but most important for the internal world and what how you see yourself.
And that even goes back to what you're mentioning with the goal weights, right? So whenever people put a number out there, it's because of what they're associating to that number. Maybe they were there before and they felt differently. Maybe they like have this number because they're thinking they're going to look a certain way or perform a certain way.
Yep.
And so when you go back to the identity piece of it and doing those daily actions or consistency of them, then you have integrity. And that's what feels good. That's what builds confidence, because you're like, I said I'm going to do this thing and I did the damn thing. And you're like, yep, check the box. I'm doing it. I'm on my way. And 9 times out of 10, even if you don't get to whatever that goal is that you set for yourself on a hard date, you're going to be closer to it. And you're going
Yeah.
to still be happy that you made that decision to do those things, versus if you never started because you didn't have the perfect scenario or because you thought you would be a failure.
Right. Right. So as we move towards the new year and potentially setting goals, because it is just ingrained in who most of us are, let's talk about how we set goals for ourselves and what we would suggest people do so that they can feel more successful, see more success, and truly, I mean, again, I don't want to talk about the end of 2025. I want to talk about March 1st. So 2 months in, have you maintained whatever you were set out to do? Are you starting to create that behavior change? And are you becoming the person that you want to become?
Yeah. So I know we're likely going to do a follow up episode to this just to talk about our specific
Yep.
goals. But if I think about like a process I have for myself, I do have to create some space, right? And that's why I honestly think that this is not a great time for a lot of people, because December's so busy and you're giving so much to others. Like, you need some quiet space. You need to think through, like, what do I really want, the, like you said, the end of 2025, like, what do I want to look back and say that I was able to do, or the person I became, right? So when I think through my next year, I'm like, I do think of the end of the year. I do think of like, what do I want to look back at and be like, damn, Lindsay, I'm proud of that. Like, what are you going to be proud of at the end of the year? And then once I figure out what those things are, like in multiple categories, right? It's not just health and fitness, it's financial, it's career, it's,
Yeah.
social, it's all the things, but it's like setting an idea of like, what do I want that to look like for me? And then going backwards from it. So I know I've talked about this before too, but like, what's the first 1 to 2 steps you need to take? If I say I want to do a race, or if I say, I want to travel to Australia, which we're going to talk about, but like, what's the first things I need to do? The first 1 to 2 steps, not the full picture, not the full package, but like, what do I need to do to get the ball moving? And also, what kind of help do I need to elicit for that? Like, do I need someone to support me? Do I need a coach? Do I need a friend? Do I need an accountability buddy? Right. So it's like figuring out what are those first couple steps and what kind of support do I need is where I would recommend starting.
Yeah. I always, at the end of every year, I do 2 different exercises. I do a value exercise to reassess where my values are, because they change. And then secondly, I do um, exercise that is the wheel of life.
Hmm.
And we should send out this resource, or we can put this resource so people can see it. But it allows you to identify what's most important to you at that moment. So financial, family, wellness, your job. I mean, there's 10 different, I want to say 10-ish different categories. And again, it changes. And I think that we oftentimes fall back if we don't have preparation and we don't create space, like you said, and time for us to really truly think about what's important to us for that. I think we always fall back to a weight number or something that has to do with our health, which is super important, but it's not always the number one, number two, or number three most important thing in your life. Are you just having a baby? If you are just having, if your family is expanding, then there are definitely things that are going to have to go on the back burner because that becomes number one. Um, we're going to talk about this on our next episode, but as you guys know, I just started a business. Like what is going to fall back because that has to come to the forefront. And so by doing those two exercises, whether it's at the end of the year, whether it's at your, around your birthday time, doing that once a year to reevaluate how your life has changed, it will allow you to reflect on the incredible things that have happened in the last 12 months. And it will start to prepare you and align your life with the thoughts in your head. So those two things are always where I start. So we'll link both the values exercise and the wheel of life. They take just a couple of minutes and they really get you critically thinking. And then I always try to go big, like, okay, in 12 months, where do I want to be? And then I start to break down like that big goal into bite-sized chunks. Because I think that as humans, we have so many things going on and we say, I want to do this, but then we don't step it back into smaller steps and we get to the end of the year or whatever. And we're like, well, shit, I didn't do it. And you're like, well, of course you didn't do it. You didn't create little baby steps to get there. So, whatever that, starting with those two exercises and then really, and I also have, whether it's a friend, whether it's a coach, a fitness coach, a business coach, just a life coach, you don't see yourself the same way the world sees you. And for me, I can look at someone's business and see gaps and see opportunities and see where like you're really rocking and rolling. But when you're in it, like for my own business, it's really hard to see those things because it's what we think about all day, every day. And our brain plays tricks on us. And so having a confidant or having a mentor or a coach, someone that can really shoot you straight and go, well, actually, this isn't what I see. And having that person to work through it with you, I also think is really important.
Yeah, and I think it's like going back to how do you, be successful this year going into it. What you started off with and how you set your goals is also important to sprinkle in throughout the year. Don't just
So
do it
true.
at the beginning and then do it again at the end. You need
Yeah.
you need to check in with yourself and evaluate. Honestly, I would say at least once a month minimum because things are going to change. You are going to need to pivot on the plan. And like something as simple as when I do my nutrition client check-ins, I have them answer 4 questions. What went well? What didn't go well? How would you change it? And then what support do you need for that change? And something that simple with whatever your goal is, health or not, can help you reevaluate and not feel like you made time pass and you didn't get anywhere with it. Like you're going to need to do that. You can't just do that once a year.
Yeah. Oh, that is absolutely right. And I was having a conversation the other day with some of my coworkers, and we were talking about change. And when you look back on your life and you look back on the decisions that you've made, one, you can think about the time that you were making that decision and thinking like, oh my gosh, well, if I go this way, this is what could happen. If I go this way, this is what could happen. And we're scared and there's a lot of fear. And there is like, I mean, even let's go back to weight loss. If I lose 20 pounds, what is that going to look like? Am I going to have to get a whole new wardrobe? Are the people that know me are going to accept me the way that I am? Am I going to there's all of these things that we create stories in our head. If I get divorced, could this happen? Is this going to be? Now think back. So you think back to those moments where you had really big life decisions or change or goals that you're making, and you can feel the feelings that you felt and the emotions. But now think back from that decision forward. Do you regret it? Do you think that it could have been better or different another way? Maybe, but most often we're like, no, it actually allowed me to go to this and then to this and then this and then to this. And we realize that the decisions we make just catapult us forward. And there's really not a, a bad decision because you adapt, you figure it out, you find a new way of living, and you can't go back and change it. So just set that goal, make that decision, but then also realize that because you made this, it's going to take you in all these different directions. So like you said, in February, you're like, okay, my goal was to run a marathon. Well, I realized that I also didn't have a lot of strength. So with my marathon training, I decided to get a personal trainer so that I could start getting a little bit stronger. But then I realized that I really love strength training. So I decided that I didn't want to run. I just like running was what I thought I had to do. So now I'm doing this, and now I'm doing a high rocks competition or whatever it may be, right? Like you just don't know the path. And sometimes we get so set on like this, and instead of just enjoying the journey and going, I'm going to create this one behavior change because I think it's going to do something good to me. And then watch the opportunities unfold. God,
Yeah.
I love life. I just think it's so great.
And I think what you're hitting on too, like with that journey, right? So we talk about, you know, it's not about the end result, it's about the process. And I literally visualize sometimes you're on a road trip, and it's a fun road trip, right? So you're on the main road, but you're gonna have to take detours. You're gonna have to, you know, get off and get gas or get food or whatever, but you're always coming back to some type of direction. And so I think some detours can last longer than others, but it's like, what do I need to do to get myself back and going instead of feeling like it has to be an on and off thing, right? So we
Yeah.
set, like, when you set these rigid rules instead of having just guiding principles, it's harder to stick to because you're either following the rule or you're not, right? Like rules are either broken or they're followed. And so don't set these rules, set this flexible principle of like, here's a general idea of where I would like to be and how I would like to go about getting there, but I'm flexible to taking a different approach if needed to get me to the same end result on the road, right? So it's
Yeah.
like the word resolution itself, I think people like there's lots of definitions for it, but the word itself can be like
Resolute.
yeah,
You are
like
resolute.
yes, and it's like an end of something, or it's like I think a lot of times people too, they set goals of like things they're not going to do. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to stop eating junk food. I'm going to stop staying up till midnight. Like they say all these things they're going to end. I would encourage you to do the opposite. As human beings, we don't like to lose, right? We don't want to feel like we're deprived of something. So set the things you do want, or if you are going to remove something, what are you going to replace it with? Like that is another big tip for people when they think about their goals. Like you should be feeling like you're getting things and not getting things taken away from you, because it's likely not going to last very long if that's the approach you take.
It's so true. I have had several conversations with a friend about decision making and like creating change. And the word resolute always comes up. Well, I'm not resolute yet. Like I need to be resolute to make this change. Are we really ever resolute? We're not. Like we're not. And like you said, you don't create change because you've like decided yes or no. I mean, sometimes, but really it's about the person who you want to become. We are human. Our brains do crazy ass things to us, right? There's always pros and cons. And so instead focusing on, this is the person who I want to become. And this is where I see my life. I don't know what my life has in store for me tomorrow versus 10 years from now, but this is the way that I want to feel. And making those changes based off of that versus resoluteness. Is that even a word? I don't know.
I don't know.
But it's interesting that you brought that up. I actually never put those two like that, like resolution and together. And you're like, oh, that's actually not a super great connotation. Like it's not like,
yeah.
Focus on the why and who you want to become, and then make those baby, small, consistent steps, because within 12 months, there's a whole lot of change that can happen if you start small and just be consistent and actually focus on one thing, maybe two things at a time.
Yeah. And I think that even goes back to like the bigger picture of like thinking about over your next year and who you want to be. You know, there's all this conversation around how long does it take for things to get easy, or how long does it take to establish a habit? And I say, I mean, the days vary, but when it feels weird not to do something is when it's a habit. So like for me, it feels weird not to work out in the morning. It feels weird not to walk my dogs. It feels weird not to meal prep. Like when you get to a place when
Yeah.
it feels weird, like then you know that's who you are. Like that is just ingrained in you. And people know you for that too. And that's fine. Hopefully you're picking things that you want to be known for. But like, if you think of your friends and your family right now, you could probably think of like 1 to 3 things that like, what would you go to them for? Right. So like,
Hmm.
who do you want to be who your friends go to for? Like, what do you want that to look like in all
Yeah.
aspects of your life?
It's so true. It's that personal brand and how we
Mhm.
see ourselves versus how the world sees us. Like personally, I'll just talk really quick about. So I've recently realized that my movement has been much less than it was a couple of months ago. And probably that is because of the business I started. And it's just a different, like I still get my workouts in, I'm still prioritizing those. But my movement has dropped and I can definitely feel it. I can definitely see it. I don't love the way that I feel. And so instead of focusing, of course, I wear my Apple Watch and I track my movement and my steps. And it is definitely an indicator of what's happening. It's not the end all be all. But instead of setting an arbitrary goal and being like, okay, I need to do this, I need to hit this now to make sure that I'm moving more, I took a moment to think about, okay, I can increase my goal or just say this is what I'm going to do every day. But if I don't identify the times during my day that I'm going to move more and create a new pattern or behavior, it's never going to change, right? So it's kind of funny. I have this little trampoline rebounder at my studio that I use for cheerleaders to learn better jumps, and we use it with our littles. And so when I'm coaching the other day, I'm like thinking, okay, I'm in a space, an active space. I'm obviously like spotting kids and moving, but I'm not like actually moving my body. So I thought, what if I just like jumped on the rebounder while I'm standing? There's like one spot where I'm always coaching. Instead of standing still or just sitting down on my butt while I'm coaching, why can't I just like be bounding or just like moving my body on this rebounder? So my other coach, London, and the girl I was coaching, they were laughing at me. And I'm like, well, it's movement. And it's like, if I start doing this at first, it was kind of funny and we were joking about it, but I'm like, if this is just what I do, this is just what I do. And not only is it going to allow other people to see me as like, she's the person that's always on the rebounder, but it allows me to get the movement in. And it's like a super tiny, ridiculous pattern that I'm changing that is going to create who knows what effects it will have. Maybe these kids will go home and they have a rebounder. And so instead of sitting down and watching television, they'll just be bouncing on their rebounder and moving their body. I mean, I don't know, but it's doing things like that is so simple and kind of silly and arbitrary as it is. It's a way that I can start to create behavior change within my world without changing huge patterns in my life that right now I just don't have the capacity for. So
I think that hits on two really important things. When we're not achieving something, I think we try to create these big issues of like, oh, it's because this, that, and the other. And that's so hard to change. It's so much time, so much money, whatever it is.
yeah,
Instead of taking, like, what could I do? Like, what is still in my control? And like, what's not a big deal, but like very doable and attainable. And so it goes back to those first 1 to 2 steps, right? And like, you didn't need like this big schedule block change. You didn't need this big piece of
right.
equipment. You're just like, oh, I'm just going to do this thing for a little bit. And I'm not setting like a hard number to it. I just want to make a point to do it more. And then I think the other thing that you like kind of hit on was the identity piece. Like you're
Yeah.
going to be like the bouncy coach and like they're going to probably make fun of you and be like, oh, you going to go jump right now? And it's like,
Yes.
but that feels good because they know you for that. And you're like, oh, I need to keep doing that now. I got to show up for myself and for them.
Right. Right. It is.
Yes.
It's just, I mean, it's so silly, but it like when we think about like, I think about the walking treadmill desks, right? And they're awesome, but are they realistic all the time? No. And so I think sometimes we're going to buy this walking treadmill desk and I'm going to walk 10 miles a day while I'm on my conference calls. And it's not realistic. And so then we think, oh, well, that's stupid. I just wasted $400 on this walking treadmill desk and I'm not even using it. So I'm just going to get rid of it. Well, what about if you got that walking treadmill desk and you just said, okay, when I'm checking my emails first thing in the morning, I'm going to walk. That 10-minute block of increased movement could have huge impacts on the rest of your life and day. And once you start doing that for 10 minutes, doesn't have to be the whole day. It doesn't have to be your 8-hour workday. You don't have to walk 10 miles a day. Like it's just starting with these like small behavior changes. And we have to normalize that. And I think that's what you and I are like so passionate about. That's why we're like, we have to talk about this because we always think big and it really
Mhm.
is
Yeah,
small.
don't get caught up in optimal and miss the realistic, right? Cuz like the realistic, as small as it may be, I think of like the example of just dropping grains of sand, like eventually that those grains become a larger lump of sand. And so it's like the magnitude of time when you're consistent with those inputs. So don't feel like you have to go from 0 to 100 and have everything be optimal and like you set your house up, set your schedule up, all these things. Like just start where you are with the small things. And so I would say, like, to wrap this all up, if something resonated with you, maybe listen back through, really encourage you to take time to like sit and be with your thoughts, like hopefully not external things coming and just like in a quiet corner, a coffee shop, whatever, and really think through this stuff. And if you guys want to like have a sounding board, reach out to Katie or I. Like you can hit us up on Instagram if you work with us in everyday life, like set some time with us. And it does help sometimes just having someone listen to you and then providing questions to make you think further through what you're saying that you want. So I think it's exciting. Don't feel like you have to do it right now, but do it when it's right for you. And also don't feel like you have to wait for a special date to start making changes.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And I also just want to say to our listeners, whether a lot of our listeners we have connections with. If we don't have a connection with you yet and you want a connection, reach out to us. And I'm happy to, help you or guide you or do a goal setting. I mean, anything. We want to be resources. And so just take a minute, take that space, like Lindsay said. And if right now is the time for you to set those goals and create those changes, great. But if right now is not that time, don't feel bad. Don't get down on yourself because the new year, January 1st, there's nothing special about it. February
Mhm.
1st could be just as special. Or you know what? March 17th. Well, that's St. Patrick's Day. So
That's special. Yeah.
oh, well, thanks you guys so much. Don't forget to, if you're watching us on YouTube, to like and subscribe. And if you are listening to us on one of the platforms, please rate and follow.
Yes. And be sure to listen to our next episode where Katie and I start to share some of what we're looking to achieve into the new year.
Pretty exciting. Well, have a wonderful day and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.